Senator Berryhill, welcome. Thank you. We will begin the committee after recess, resume our hearing today, and we will start with item 5. And at the conclusion of item 5, we will then move across the hall to the room over there, 4203, I think it is, and do 4203 and continue the hearing from that location, because this one will be used at 1:30. So after this particular hearing in item 5, we will pick up and move, and then take a 15-minute recess at that point, and then begin again with item number 6. So welcome. We're going to be reviewing the Contractor State License Board. So please identify yourselves and begin. Yes, sir. It should be on, if I believe so.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Is that on? It is on. Okay.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is David Diaz. I'm this year's chair of the Contractor State License Board. I hold one of the 15 board member positions. I'm here today with Registrar Cindy Christensen and Chief of Enforcement David Vogt. The CSLB is comprised of 10 public members, which include 1 labor representative, 1 local building official, 1 representative of a statewide senior citizen organization. The other 5 members of the board are licensed contractors. The board was established in 1929. Today, there are more than 285,000 contractors in the state of California. The work of a licensed contractor touches our lives every day. Contractors are responsible for building our homes, including but not limited to electrical, plumbing, and mechanical systems. Licensed contractors build the roads we drive on, the buildings we work in, the stores we shop, schools our children attend. They're also responsible for our infrastructure, including projects like the Shasta Dam, the 700-mile-long California Aqueduct, the restoration and earthquake retrofit of this grand state capitol building, which underwent some 40 years ago, and iconic landmarks including the Golden Gate Bridge and the Transamerica Pyramid. The construction industry is the backbone of California's economy, and regulating it is filled with many unique challenges. We welcome the opportunity to give you a closer look at the board's operations and to address some of the issues we are facing, as well as what's happening today in the state's construction industry. I will now turn this over to Cindy Christensen.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Mr. Chair and Madam Chair, members of the committee and committee staff. I'd like to really thank the committee staff for working with us so closely in preparing for the hearing today. They did a great job. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what the board does, discuss the changes that have occurred since the last Sunset hearing, discuss improvements, and then also discuss the assistance that DCA provides us. As Mr. Diaz indicated, we have more than 285,000 licensed contractors in the state in 44 different licensing classifications. There are an additional 59 limited specialty classifications. We have a staff of over 424.5 individuals, and we have a $63 million budget. We have basically 5 divisions. We have our testing division, which is full service. They develop and administer exams, over 46 different license types. We have administered 30 exams each year at 8 testing centers around the state, and the testing centers utilize our state-of-the-art computer system that was developed in-house. Our licensing division is responsible for processing applications and determining qualifications for licensure. In addition to that, that unit oversees the criminal background unit. To date, approximately 160,000 licensees have submitted fingerprints, with 17.7% found to have some type of criminal conviction. The vast majority are not substantially related to the practice of contracting and do not keep the applicant from becoming licensed. In 2014, 36 licenses were denied due to previous criminal convictions. We also maintain a call center with 24 automated service, and last year we answered over 146,000 phone calls. Our enforcement division, last year we received approximately 17,000 consumer complaints every year. 3/4 of those are filed against licensed contractors, and 1/4 are filed against unlicensed contractors. About 70% of those complaints are resolved in one of our intake and mediation centers. We also have complaints involving fraud or other alleged violations of law, and those are assigned to an investigative center. The investigations can lead to an administrative case against a licensee, a criminal case, or both. We utilize progressive discipline with penalties ranging from a warning letter to filing an accusation or suspension or revocation of a contractor's license. In fiscal year 2013-14, CSLB revoked 311 licenses. We also maintain the statewide investigative fraud team, or SWIFT. That team proactively enforces licensing laws with a particular focus on unlicensed activities. One of their most important tools is underground sting operations, with an average of conducting 1 sting each week, somewhere in California. CSLB is also a key partner in the Joint Enforcement Strike Force and the Labor Enforcement Task Force, 2 multiple agency partnerships targeting the underground economy. We also have our own information technologies unit, and we also have a public affairs staff. And within that public affairs division is our highly successful Senior Scam Stoppers program. Since the last meeting, I'm going to highlight a few things. Since the last hearing, I'd like to highlight a few things. One of the concerns was the workload of vacancies with CSLB, since we had lost so much staff during the freeze and with furloughs. It was not much of an issue because of the downturn in the economy. There were less applications and less enforcement activity. However, the economy is rebounding, and especially with the construction industry. We will be looking at our workloads. We are trying to streamline whenever we can, look at workload analyses, but it will come a time where we have to request staff. Currently, we have a concern with our ability to target the underground economy within our public works and within remote areas of the state. Last year, we submitted a budget change proposal that would have given us 4 additional staff within the public works, and then another 3 staff within our statewide investigative fraud team to tackle the issues within the remote areas, such as the Santa Barbara and Mendocino areas, to name 2 of them. Our limited liability company program was fully implemented. We have implemented all of the enforcement monitor recommendations, which included filling key positions, which was the Chief Deputy of Enforcement, and that is working very well. We did receive last year, through a budget change proposal, 4 additional positions in our subsequent arrest unit. We have also instituted comprehensive training specifically for our enforcement reps, which includes basic investigative techniques, report writing, interviewing techniques, code training, and time management. As far as improvements that we would like to see and that would assist the board, we would like to simplify and clarify the home improvement contract law, which Mr. Fote will discuss later. We would like to have additional offset to address concerns with our increased underground economy activity related to public work projects, which I discussed briefly. We would also like to eliminate the $2,500 capital requirement and increase the surety bond by $2,500. This would provide better protection to the consumer. And then with that, we would also increase our arbitration amount from the $10,000 to $12,500. And lastly, we would like to work on our arbitration program. We are very concerned that the ability of a contractor who wins a case during arbitration has the ability to go into civil court and receive attorney fees from a consumer. This has caused a chilling effect in our arbitration program, and we would like to work with you on that. As far as the assistance that DCA provides us, they assist us in many areas, including administrative, information technology, and legal issues. We maintain a very cooperative relationship with DCA and have realized an increase in services with the current leadership at DCA. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to David Fote, who will address issues 10, 11, 12, and 14.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hill, Co-Chair Bonilla, committee members, and staff. The first issue I'd like to address is the use of peace officers in enforcement efforts, and I'd like to provide a little clarification on our underground sting operations. They are focused on unlicensed individuals. Generally, there's somebody that's harmed a consumer, or they're advertising illegally. Most of them have been previously warned, yet they're still out there in the community. What's important to recognize is that we don't generally know who the person is that placed the ad. We do not use our sworn peace officers for our undercover operations. The reason for that is they're unarmed. We're very fortunate that we have 28 members or enforcement reps assigned to our statewide investigative fraud team that have authority from the director to issue notices to appear. That is who conducts the stings. There's been some concern that we've partnered with U.S. immigration agents in our sting operations. What we've done is we've gone back and we've looked at our operations for the last 10 years, and in doing so, we've identified that we've conducted more than 700 stings. ICE agents were used very, very rarely. They were used approximately 20 times during the past 10 years.
And perhaps while we're going,
Sure.
maybe you kind of prompt questions that
Sure.
if I could, and I apologize for interrupting you, but it may be good to follow along with that. So when you say that there were ICE agents used on some of those but not others, what prompted them to be used on the ones that they were?
Yeah, thank you. So when we're setting up a sting, the first thing we do is we approach a district attorney, because the sting focuses on unlicensed practice, and that's chargeable as a misdemeanor. So when we approach the DA, we need to make sure they can prosecute the sting cases. We also ask them for backup. We're going to want to have 3 armed officers at our sting operation. Most DAs can provide 1 or 2. We need a third. There are some counties, I think there was 5 counties that were working with ICE agents at the time, and they suggested that you may want to use an ICE agent for the 5th one. The Contractors Board has never had the training or the desire to identify someone that may be an undocumented immigrant. That's not the intention of the sting operations. The ICE agents were there for security purposes.
And they were never requested by the agents, by the board?
They were invited to the sting, but in the capacity that we needed a 3rd armed officer at the sting.
Is that were those the only armed officers that were available anywhere?
There may have been others, but at that time we were looking for a 3rd one. They were working with the county DAs, and it was more of just looking for resources. But I became aware of it in August of 2013, and I asked the department what the administration's policy was on the use of ICE agents. The response was it's strongly discouraged. At that point, on August 20th, 2013, I distributed a memo to all staff telling them that you're not to invite or have ICE at a sting operation. And I've confirmed with our staff that from that point forward, we did not have ICE agents at the sting.
Well, you said from that point forward, you would not use ICE agents for sting operations. Are there other instances when you would use ICE agents?
What we're looking, is there other instances? The answer to that would be, in general, no. There's one possible exception to that I became aware of last night. We stopped partnering with having ICE at our enforcement operations after that point. Now, what has happened in one county is they have an individual that has active warrants for that person's arrest, and they're working with ICE, and they did contact one of our investigators and ask if they could work with them, not on a sting, but in some way to identify if they've had any consumer complaints. It was somebody that was actively harming consumers. That was the exception, but that's all I've been able to find since 2013. But what we're looking to do is make sure everybody's comfortable with the way we conduct stings. And so we're proposing to have a meeting with the Latino caucus, perhaps members of our committee staff, and also the Speaker Pro Tem staff to look over our procedures and make sure that everybody's comfortable with them. But I just want to assure you, though, that it's never been our intention to be involved in immigration issues in any way.
So there was no profiling at all by surnames or anything on the part of the contractor's licensed staff?
No profiling. What you have, though, in conducting a sting is, just to give you an example, if you go to Craigslist and you're looking for a roofing, you'll see like Joe the Roofer or the roofing guy, something like that. We're going to check that and see if they're licensed. That would be somebody that we would call out. We're calling out people that have had consumer complaints. There has been absolutely no profiling, and that was never the intention of having ICE at a sting.
Was the board, and I apologize for, but we may as well just conclude this at this point. was the board aware, or maybe you did briefly, but kind of walk me through or walk the committee through the process for a sting operation, how it goes, and you indicated that then you go to the district attorney, and that's where the three law enforcement or armed officers are requested or
Sure.
suggested.
Yes. The first thing that you would do is go to the DA and tell them you want to do a 1 to 2 day sting. Do you have the capability of prosecuting anywhere from 10 to 20 notices to appear? And these are misdemeanor citations for unlicensed practice and also illegal advertising. You would also ask the district attorney if they have any targets that they would like to have called out. And you would ask them if they can supply backup security at the sting. The second thing we would do is reach out to, we would look at our consumer complaints and see if we have consumers that have been harmed by a contractor, and that would be a target, because then you have someone that's actually has caused some harm, and it could be a subsequent filing with the DA. The third area you look at are illegal print ads. We work very closely with the construction industry, and they're constantly giving us advertisements that are illegal. They don't include a license number. There's no indication that the person does have a license. And on a lot of those, we'll call up that individual, warn them, send them an application, try to get them licensed. But that's how we would obtain our leads. The next step is simply to call them up. And the reality is, for most people we're calling, we don't have a good ID on them. We don't know their full name. We're just calling like any homeowner and asking them to come out and give us a bid on a roof. And out they come. But again, there was never been any desire in any way to be expanding what we're looking. All we're looking to do is protect consumers in the construction industry, and we're looking to focus our resources on the most egregious offenders.
When this policy, when it happened, or when the district attorneys and the law enforcement personnel, the armed personnel that came, the three individuals, and how you were secured from that with those individuals in that process, and the fact that the makeup of that team, that strike team, was that ever communicated to the board in any way? Were they ever aware of the makeup of that strike, or some of those strike teams?
Yes. After every sting, what we do is we distribute a press release, and so that press release indicates who we partnered with. A good example is last week we did a California Blitz, we call it. We did 7 simultaneous stings, and what you see is you've got the DAs that were present in every sting operation, but then you have other partners. You have the Highway Patrol, you have the Sheriff, you have other partners that were also played a part in it. So the board members were very much aware. At the time this occurred, again, it was prior to 2013, it was not anything that was on our radar. We just realized that our staff were looking for backup at sting operations that was available, and so that participation was in our press releases.
Okay, and I understand and you've indicated that that's not the policy going forward, but the Little Hoover Commission, and I haven't read the whole report, but they're talking about in using the local jurisdictions now will take on some responsibility, and they will have their own teams that would go out, and there's kind of an incentive for local jurisdictions, and they would bring the license board, and ICE was even included in their report for that. Is that something that you're looking at participating in, or would have?
Well, that issue specifically, we're looking forward to meeting with the Latino Caucus and perhaps your staff and addressing, because our thought right now is we wouldn't participate in that. That is something that a county is setting up. They're inviting ICE. So the question is, should the contractors board be part of that team? And our inclination is no.
Okay, and when does the board itself, were they notified, or were there any memos or communications or documentation in that on the policies of how the undercover operations were conducted, so that they would be aware? Was there anything basically in writing to identify the process and how it was done?
We have very detailed sting procedures. I do not believe that the board members have been that has been made available to them. We do have quarterly board meetings and enforcement committee meetings where we brought in our law enforcement partners and talked about the undercover operations. I would just emphasize, though, that the time this was occurring, it was very rare, and it wasn't anything that we were thinking about. Perhaps we should have been thinking more about it. It was just that they were back up at the stings, And when it came to our attention from the Department of Relations, then we looked into it and we stopped the practice. And again, I surveyed our staff, and they haven't been involved in ICE.
And it wasn't, and I think you made it clear, it wasn't your request to have the ICE officers there. It was, I mean, in the sense of you were, from what I'm hearing, and I think the committee's hearing, is that you were requesting the enforcement personnel to be there as security, and you didn't specifically ask for an ICE officer to be there as one of the three. I mean, it happened that way from what I hear, but because that was one that was presented as being available, but you didn't specifically ask for that person.
That is correct. We asked for 3 armed law enforcement officers to provide security, at least 3.
Okay, thank you. And now I apologize again for interrupting you. If you have any other questions. Okay. Thank you.
If I could just provide some clarification on our peace officers, that was also, I think, one of the questions. And our peace officers are unique under the Department of Consumer Affairs umbrella because they are not armed, and we use them perhaps a little bit differently than other peace officers. But what we've emphasized is that they need to be recognized experts statewide in the investigation of elder abuse and financial crimes, and they've had the training to do that. And what they bring to the table is the ability to assist in executing search warrants and also to put these financial crime cases together with the non-sworn staff. I think if you look at our production numbers for the last 7 months, with consumer filed complaints, we completed more than 1,200 investigations referred to district attorneys, and out of those consumer filed complaints, more than 300 of them, well, I should say 1,200 were legal actions, more than 300 were referred to DAs for criminal prosecution. And that's important because you've got consumers that they're out there losing their life savings. And that's why we feel so strongly that the peace officers that we have at the Contractors Board should remain with the Contractors Board because the work they do is very specialized.
And you don't feel the Division of Investigations from DCA would be adequate to provide that same service or level of service?
I think you would lose the specialization. You lose the partnering with the consumer protection DAs that we've set up with the construction industry. I think it would be a detriment. I think if the committee is going to look at that seriously, I would ask that you take a look at the cycle times, that we do survey all of our complainants upon completion of an investigation, the satisfaction they have with it, and to also interview consumer protection prosecutors throughout the state because they're going to support the Contractors Board retaining these peace officers because of their specialized knowledge. When they walk into a DA's office, the DA's office knows they understand the business. We have the resources to send other contractors out to establish the value of the work performed. That's extremely important in our industry.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Please.
Okay, so the next issue is licensee identification. The Employment Development Department is the chair of the Joint Enforcement Strike Force, and we've worked very closely with them over a number of years. Employment, well, for the acronym being EDD, is responsible for tax withholding, and we know that in construction we have a lot of our licensees, and certainly the unlicensed, they are not withholding taxes from their workers' paychecks. They're not providing them the protections that they deserve with workers' compensation insurance and also unemployment insurance. We work closely with EDD to share our information. And I just want to explain why this is so important. Because by working with EDD and sharing our license database, they're able to determine the contractors that are committing the most egregious offenses. They're able to help us vet our leads. So we're going out and running a lead or conducting a sweep. We're not stopping at a law-abiding job site. We're able to identify those contractors that we've already determined have a number of employees who are not withholding taxes, and they may be underreporting their payroll to the workers' comp carrier. Last year, by sharing information, EDD was able to identify more than $170 million in unreported tax withholding, and we were able to help them collect more than $10 million. And what's distressing is that in the last 30 days, more than 500 EDD employees have lost their access to CSLB's database. We can no longer share our information with EDD, and that is going to harm those contractors that are out there playing by the rules and trying to succeed. So we're hoping for support with legislation that will make it clear that the Contractors Board can provide information to EDD. The dilemma is they're unable to use our information if we can't provide them the Social Security number as an identifier. And
Are there other identifiers that would be available other than Social Security numbers?
Well, at this time, a federal employer identification number will work. That's another one. The problem, though, is most of our licensees, when they submit an original application for license, they don't have employees at that time, so they don't provide that to us. If it was mandatory that they had to provide it, that would be a good substitute. But the majority of our licensees, just to explain that a little bit, when you make your application out, you may have not started your business yet, so you don't have workers' compensation insurance, you haven't registered as an employer. But you do have a Social Security number, and that's what remains on our records, is that Social Security number.
But the federal ID number, God, I started my business, I mean, it was the 1960s, and it had the federal ID number, same number today. I don't remember if it was the criteria was you had to have employees at the time or not. It's a long time ago. So you're saying that that's necessary, that you do need it. But what about there's the EDD and CSLB are part of the Labor Enforcement Task Force, which allows both agencies to share information with the others. So why do you specifically need Social Security numbers then if you have this ability already?
What we've been told is we only have the ability to share our Social Security number with the Franchise Tax Board, and that's for family support issues. We do not have the authority under just the Joint Enforcement Strike Force or the Labor Enforcement Task Force to share a Social Security number with the EDD.
And that's how you feel you could support the enforcement efforts, is by having the ability to use and share that Social Security number with EDD. That's a major part of your enforcement efforts.
It's absolutely critical because EDD has the data warehouse for all the partnering agencies, and so our license information needs to be put into that data warehouse so it can be shared by the Franchise Tax Board.
Okay, so that's for tax purposes, and then you've got for workers' comp purposes. But your issues are the licensing and consumer protection of the work of the contractor, whether licensed or not licensed. So it sounds like your efforts with Social Security numbers are to enhance the efforts of EDD and the Franchise Tax Board rather than the efforts of what you're charged for.
Yeah, if I could elaborate on that for just a quick second.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
I'm just trying to learn.
Yeah, a lot of times we get talking a lot about the stings and the sweeps and the proactive enforcement, and that's a small part of what we do at the Contractors Board. Our mandate is to protect consumers, and our primary focus is on consumer issues. The majority of our staff, they work strictly consumer-filed complaints. We have 2 intake mediation centers that initially receive the complaints. We're very proud that with our licensee complaints, we're able to settle or resolve more than 70% of them, and more than 40% restitutions returned. And for the last 6 months, we were able to help collect more than $7 million. We're focused on early intervention, resolving them within 60 days, and taking timely action against licensees that pose a threat. There was some question about what's your number one priority. Our number one priority here is a licensed contractor that's out in the marketplace that is engaged in egregious behavior, because people are going to our website and they're relying on it, and we need to get the disclosure up there. That's where we focus most of our resources. When we talk about sting, sweeps, or even EDD, it's a secondary issue. We receive a lot of pressure from the licensees that we regulate to provide them some protection. It's not that we're spending a lot of resources, or very minimal resources, on working with EDD. It's just that we want to help them to do their job, so that protects our licensees that aren't getting the consumer complaints, that are out there insuring their workers, paying their taxes so they can continue in business. So you're right, it is a secondary issue. It's not our primary focus.
Yeah, I know. And as one of your licensees, I appreciate the efforts that you go through to eliminate the unlicensed contractors, because they do present a problem for every licensed contractor that they do. I guess it's just the extent in which your involvement with other agencies exceeds your core mission, I guess, is how I would look at it. And so that's just a concern that I have, and you may be able to argue, and maybe rightly so, that it is one and the same, because if you're getting them with their license, then you're also getting them for tax evasion on this end and workers' comp violations on that end. So it's an interesting issue, but I guess my concern is more your core mission and that's what you should be focused on more so. But please continue. I'm sorry.
Okay. If we can move on to issue number 12, the employee misclassification. And this may also be something that wouldn't be considered as part of our core mission, but it's something that we have, our board has asked us, the Enforcement Division, to look into. In 2012, we established a Public Works unit. We hadn't been involved very much at all in Public Works in the past. But what we were hearing is that the public funds are being used for these public projects, and they're supposed to be used to pay prevailing wage for workers. And there's little enforcement of that. I mean, Division of Labor Standards Enforcement is enforcing those requirements, and they do a fine job. The problem is there was no disclosure on a license. So if you were at a school district or you're at your awarding agency, perhaps the Department of Corrections, and you go to the Contractors Board's website, there's no indication that an awarding agency had an issue with a contractor not paying prevailing wage. It's really employee theft. And when we started to look into it, we realized that we have contractors that they're failing to pay employees hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a serious problem. But again, is that our primary mandate? Perhaps not, but it's something we're concerned about. So in 2012, we established a pilot program, a Public Works pilot program comprised of 2 investigators. It has subsequently expanded to 3. And in doing that, it's opened our eyes to what's going on in the public works arena. You've got contractors out there that are unlicensed, that have been revoked in the residential community. They're working behind the scenes. They're the low bidder on a job, and they're the low bidder because they have no intention of paying their employees what they're due. It's a tremendous problem. So we've met with the Labor Commissioner's office, and we understand that they issue over 400 civil wage and penalty assessments each year, and those civil wage and penalty assessments relate to misclassification of workers. Big problem. So what we did is we wrote up accusations to revoke licenses, to discipline them. They went to the Attorney General's office. They got returned. They said, you don't have clear statutory authority to be doing this, that you would need to change or enact a new law. We did a legislative proposal that our board did consider, but they asked that we take a look at what we could do with existing resources. So that's what I want to very quickly just share with you. What we're looking at today is establishing a memorandum of understanding with the Labor Commissioner. So when they recognize something like this, we could take action early on for an underlying issue, such as failing to report your certified payroll timely, perhaps writing bad checks to employees. I mentioned the 400 civil wage and penalty assessments. We're asking the Department of Consumer Affairs to approve suspending licenses under 7124.6 of the Business Professions Code. It says we can suspend for a Department of Industrial Relations outstanding liability. We want to make sure that can be done for a Labor Commissioner outstanding liability. We're exploring changing our application to make sure it can be disclosed, and we're pushing forward administrative actions for what I previously mentioned for underlying issues that relate to the misclassification of the worker. And what our board has said is we'll see if this works, and we'll come back in a year, and we may need legislation, though, to provide clear authority for the Contractors Board to take administrative action when somebody's subject to a civil wage and penalty assessment.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, one more, I believe, 14.
And the last one is the underground infrastructure, and that relates to, we refer to as dig alert, calling 811 when you're going to be, before you do excavation. We've been very active in working with PG&E, among others. We're part of their Gold Star program. We've received an award from PG&E for our participation with the Gold Star program. And what we're looking to do, though, is to do all we can to educate our licensees on the need to be digging or to be calling before you dig. We're very pleased that last year we received 145 referrals from PG&E, AT&T, other public utilities. What we did with those is we warned them they have to go to training, they have to learn why it's so important that they play by the rules. And for those that reoffended, we took an administrative action. Last year we wrote 6 administrative citations for contractors that continue to reoffend.
Okay, and that was really where I was going to go with that, is to see how seriously the CSLB takes the issue of dig-ins and those who dig without calling and getting the facilities marked. So you mentioned that there are some, you give a warning and then you give them, not a warning, but they have to there's some re-education involved if they are caught. To me, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And I know in PG&E, just as one utility in California, the number of dig-ins that they have almost daily in their service area is frightening. One recently in Monterey closed Highway 1 for hours. In fact, Senator Monning got stuck and had to do a diversion, and he could hear the gas going out of the pipe. It was that high-pressure line. The cost involved to first responders and everything is extraordinary in that case. So my concern is what lengths you will go to, because I think this is important, because it's certainly a violation of contractors' law, basically, and how they detecting, investigating, and then enforcing those violations, and what type of administrative action you're going to do. Frankly, I think you should ramp up whatever you're doing to do it, to be more serious in looking at those, more serious in the sanction aspect of it. As a contractor, it's hard for me to say that, but I think it's important, and I think to protect the public as well as the contractor, that everyone take this seriously, because the number of those digging without calling is a very large percentage of the violations of those instances. They're certainly mismarked. Those are there as well, but I think that's a very small percentage of it. So, was that? Those are my questions. So, if others, anyone may have. Yes, I'm sorry, Senator Berryhill.
Yeah, thanks for coming today. This is very interesting. My question is on the underground economy as a whole. That it's an epidemic not only in my district but throughout this state, and it really does penalize the good actors. And so recently the Little Hoover Commission report mentioned some enforcement actions that can be taken. I guess my question is, has staff reviewed any of the recommendations recently identified in the Little Hoover Commission report on putting an end to the underground economy released this month? And, if there's specifically some stuff that you like in that, I'm sure that there's legislators up here today that would love to run a bill with your help and try to eliminate some of this epidemic that we've got across this country.
No, thank you, Senator Berryhill. We were very pleased to play an active role with the Little Hoover Commission, and we support what they have in those recommendations. We'll certainly follow up and see what we can bring forward.
That would be fantastic, because I would be interested in running something.
Thank you.
And I would concur with Senator Berryhill, which I do all the time. Other questions or comments? Yes.
On the digging that you were mentioning, my thought was, have you thought of ways to, besides like public education, asking the contractors to make those calls, is there some trigger that happens in the process of their work where that could become a stronger requirement, or is there any way for from the call center, or are there permits being pulled at a city? I mean, are there other steps in the process, or is this normally just happening on a very small scale? I mean, when it's a larger construction project, I would think that there would be a lot of ways to make sure that call needed to be made first to check for the underground.
I think that's a great idea.
Or is it all backyard digging that we're talking about?
We're fortunate to have a board member a building official as a board member, and we could explore that with her. What information could we get out to the building departments? And these contractors, they need to understand how important this is, because one thing I forgot to mention, they're responsible for the damage that occurred, and that can be devastating. So while we're doing a lot internally with our website and our public outreach, we're looking for opportunities to do more. And PG&E has said when you've warned somebody, we've had outreach to them, they're not reoffending, so there's benefit in that.
Right.
Thank you.
Education is important, but in most cases it works. That's great. So, any other questions? Well, then we'll take this opportunity for the professional groups, organizations, or individuals, public, to comment. It would be wonderful. And then we will adjourn for 15 minutes and then reconvene at 1:30 across the hall at 4203. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Joe Cruz on behalf of the State Council of Laborers. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank this committee for raising some important issues in the line of questioning that I think improves consumer protection and also improves the board's efficiency. But I do want to just weigh in and my support for this for the CSLB and their work. They've done incredible work trying to tackle and rein in these what I would call Craigslist contractors who continue to violate state law, who go after our elderly, who put their employees at risk, and also make it very difficult for the contractors who employ my members to stay competitive in California. So we just want to have the opportunity to one, appreciate their work and ask this committee to continue to support the sunset. And if you have any questions, please feel free to call.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Mr. Chair, Phil Vermeulen, representing the fence contractors, Flasher Barricade, and several other contractor associations. We, too, would like to weigh in and say that, we're proud of working with the Contractors Board for many, many, many years and keep battling the underground economy. It's frustrating trying to play with a level field when you've got these guys that are not paying workers' comp, proper wages or anything. And so we continue to work with them to try to strengthen the laws and go after the bad guys. And they're doing a great job. They've got a tremendous task. And with the industry working with them, all we can do is keep plugging forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments.
Hi, Jamie Kahn with the Associated General Contractors, and also here to indicate our support of the board and their activities. They have made a smooth transformation, or transition, I should say, from Steve Sands, their previous registrar, to Cindy Christensen, who's just doing a very outstanding job. Those are big shoes to fill too, Cindy. So, and also the contractors are very concerned about licensing, and we think that the board has done a very good job with the 15,000, I think, licenses that they go through each year, or that they issue each year. Our contractors always find that it's always been a smooth, and they've been very good about getting our licenses through in an effective manner, and that's always been the biggest concern for us. On the enforcement side, we think that David's been doing a great job with the strike forces, and the whole idea is to try to make sure that everyone is licensed. With their strike forces, they go after the unlicensed group, and that's who we and also that information has been well publicized, so that the public knows that not only are we going after the unlicensed folks, that those who are unlicensed ought to get their licenses. So I think that the PR that they have received from this has always been very good as well. Okay, I think that's about all I have at this time.
Thank you,
Thank
Stein.
you.
Other individuals wishing to comment? See no one. Thank you very much for your report today, and we will recess until 1:35 to 4203 across the hall, where we will take up item 6, the California Architects Board and Landscape Architects Technical Committee. Thank you. We are in recess.